I do believe it's Angers currently sitting at the top of the table, with Clermont Foot not too far behind. Two teams that Lionel Messi will have quite a lot of fun playing against this season, you'd imagine. But yeah, Clermont was their last weekend, was their first ever game in France's top flight. And I have to mention that a scouted favourite, Mohamed Bayo, only went and got the first goal in their win at Bordeaux. But every year, though, lots of players pop up on the radar for the very first time in France, making their bow in Ligue. Some have previously played in lower divisions or so-called lesser leagues elsewhere, but there's always a steady stream of breakout youngsters debuting in France's top flight. It is, after all, the self-styled League of Talents. So over the past week or so, myself and today's esteemed guest have been firing across a WhatsApp message here and there, sharing who we think is set for a breakout season in Liga. Road to Nowhere Football's Ally Madden, I'm delighted to say, joins me for a debut on the Scouted Pod. Some of you might be familiar with Ally from the Road to Nowhere podcast, but also from Pure Football's Euro 2020 preview episodes, one for each team. I know I dipped in and out, and I know for certain that was an absolutely monumental effort. So this is a man who very much knows his European football. Ally, how are things with you?
Yeah, not bad, Joe. Delighted to be on the podcast, regular listener, big fan, and yeah, feeling good. I was scurrying across from the east end of Glasgow back to the city centre, my flat in the city centre, after having taken in Celtic's game tonight in their European qualifier over at Parkhead. I took that in as a neutral, so I'm now looking forward to turning my attention to some French football and chatting about some exciting young players with you.
Yeah, the Celtic might be coming up against a few of these players if the draws go a certain way in playoffs and group stages. But I say we were firing player suggestions across. But to tell everybody the truth, it was all Ally. He's been the instigator. And if you want any reassurances of his European and Liga knowledge and his credentials, you'll only need to go through our chat history on the past few days. It's been quite a learning curve. It's a bit of the scouted fraud ball going on here. quite a few names that have been popping up, and I've gone, oh, okay. I haven't come across that one before. But I'm looking forward to it as well, because Liga is so interesting, so diverse. And as I say, it's, the self-styled League of Talents. But yeah, we'll get into it with our sort of first pick. And Ally, I'm going to go to you first. And I'm going to go with Malo Gusto, who is somebody who's got a very decidedly Portuguese name, but isn't fully Portuguese.
Yeah, he's a French-Portuguese dual national, but he has spent some time with the French youth squads. He's an academy graduate at Lyon, and I'll come on to discuss just how good, well, your listeners will know just how good it is, but I'm going to come on to discuss how important it will probably be, certainly over the next few years, even more important than usual. He's contracted until 2024, and last season he was in and around the first team squad under Rudy Garcia, but he only managed a couple of very brief cameos, 1 minute in over 2 games in the league. But that time spent in and around the squad will have been beneficial for him, for his development and for his experience. But we saw him play the full 90 minutes against Brest on the opening weekend of Ligue 1. We saw him have a really good pre-season, and I'll come back to that as well. But just to focus on that performance against Brest, the stats show and reflect a really intense involvement on Gusto's part over the full 90 minutes. He registered 3 shots, and only Houssem Aouar managed more for Lyon. 12 ball recoveries, which was the third most in the Lyon team. Managed 2 interceptions as well. 7 successful pressures applied, which was the second most in the Lyon team. He completed 95 passes out of 107 attempted, which ranked third for his side, and he managed 125 touches, which was joint first with central defender Marcelo. So straight away, those numbers jump out at you as being reflective of a player who's been heavily involved throughout the game for his team in that right back position. And I'll be honest with you, Joe, he did obviously have this really positive and encouraging pre-season, but Lyon did announce recently that Leo Dubois would be their new captain. And I did think to myself, what would that mean for Gusto's game time, competitive game time this season? But reassuringly, he started against Brest, and we also saw Dubois starting but out over at left back. And I think circumstance is really heavily favouring Malo Gusto. Obviously, he was back training earlier than Leo Dubois because Dubois was part of Didier Deschamps' France squad at the Euros, so he returned slightly later than some of his teammates, allowing Malo Gusto to really catch Peter Bosch's eye, perhaps. And also, Dubois playing at left back was probably through necessity rather than anything else against Brest, because Melvin Bard's obviously been sold somewhat bafflingly to Nice. And also Maxwell Cornet's been linked with moves away. I think Hertha Berlin perhaps is the rumoured destination for him. So circumstance has really favoured Malo Gusto, and you can say, well, he's been given his chance, and he's taken his chance. I mentioned that really impressive pre-season. He was excellent in the games against Wolfsburg and Villarreal. He was awarded man of the match against Wolfsburg, putting a lovely cross for one of his teammates who was then headed in. I think it was Carl Toko Ekambi who headed it in, but it's a beautiful cross from deep, and we saw him do that a couple of times. So the early signs are really positive, and that's relatively high caliber opposition. It's not like they're playing, second, third, maybe even fourth tier teams to bring up match fitness. These are high quality oppositions, and he didn't look out of place at all. He obviously mentioned that he's a youth academy graduate, and throughout recent history, Lyon have had this esteemed youth academy. We think of the likes of Karim Benzema, Lacazette, Houssem Aouar, to name but a few who have come through Lyon's youth academy. It really is this conveyor belt of talent. And when we think back to when Lyon built the Groupama Stadium, this lovely new stadium, I've only been there once, but it's just state of the art, really good, fan experience there. But that naturally limited their transfer budget. So Bruno Genesio, almost through necessity, and there was a desire on his part as well, but mostly through necessity, I would say, had to turn to the youth academy. And now, fast forward to 2021, the tail end, we hope, of the coronavirus pandemic, or approaching the tail end of the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of clubs are feeling the financial force of not having fans in stadiums, etc., etc. Jean-Michel Aulas announced that Lyon have suffered losses of about 135 million euros as a result of various factors caused by the pandemic. So I think we'll see Peter Bosch turn again to Lyon's youth academy. We saw quite a few young players on the bench as well. I think we'll maybe talk about another young player later in this episode. But what I took from the game on the weekend was that Peter Bosch will absolutely trust in youth. We saw his Ajax team where he afforded plenty of game time to young players, and the squad was, of course, peppered with some more experienced players, but there were so many young players given ample game time. And I think this will be a hallmark of Peter Bosch's Lyon side. I'm thinking as well of Castello Luqueba, the 18-year-old who started for Lyon. He was one of 6 players, including Gusto, who started for Lyon on the weekend, who had been, a product of Lyon's youth academy. And just as well, I speak about circumstance favouring him, but I just think his performances in pre-season, his performance against Brest when he was so heavily involved, really bode well. Peter Bosch himself, he's made no secret of the fact that he likes to play with a high intensity style on and off the ball. And interestingly enough, Malo Gusto previously played in his earlier formative years as a box-to-box midfielder and then latterly as a winger before settling as a right back. So that's probably allowed him to develop a quite rounded, albeit still very raw, skill set. It's allowed him to develop this ability to work tirelessly down the wing, and that will do him, untold favours as far as Peter Bosch is concerned. I think he will be a regular feature, particularly if we see Maxwell Cornet move on and Leo Dubois settles in at left back, having predominantly played last season at right back. I don't think Dubois looked too out of place, and as captain you would imagine he would start, but all in all I think everything is played into his favour. The lack of options at fullback for Lyon compared to their midfield where they're stacked with talent, the fact that he was training before, or back in training before Leo Dubois, and the fact that he played so well in those friendlies. He's had his chance and he's absolutely taken it, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very circumstantial because I also saw the Leo Dubois news that you referred to, him obviously being named captain, and obviously you do immediately think. I mean, anybody who's followed French football or followed OL over the past, I don't know, couple of years, Dubois has not been a leading light, but he has been a mainstay. He has been a stalwart of that team, and you do know that he is their right back. And I think if he is going to play at left back, and Malo Gusto is the sort of the backup of in a sense at right back, who's going to come to the fore in that position because of a positional switch for Dubois, then it's only going to benefit him. I mean, we'll probably see there'll be a few games this season where he might be caught out of his depth. That's par for the course for 18-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the encouraging thing, and that's something that you mentioned there, was the fact that he's so involved. It's his, one of his first, if not his first, Ligue 1 start last weekend. They're playing Angers away this weekend. On Sunday, the 15th of August. So it'll be interesting to see what they line up like with Malo Gusto or Dubois or both. So that is definitely one to keep an eye on. But as you mentioned, there's another player at Lyon who is certainly of interest to Scouted Football and has been for quite some time. And I did mention to Ali, I said, we're going for quite rogue sort of left field picks here, but I'm going to go for the most obvious breakout star of Ligue 1 for 2021-22. Mm-hmm. And I suppose it's, I've kind of reconciled with myself over the past few days of maybe going with the easy option, but it's true, he is absolutely going to have a breakout season. It would be a miss to leave him out. And that's Rayan Cherki, who is, of course, the right-footed attacking midfielder, currently 17, but if you're listening to this next week, Cherki might have already turned 18, so still very young. I mean, that's the common theme with Cherki, is that he does everything before everyone else. Last summer he became the youngest ever player to appear in a Champions League knockout fixture 2 days after his 17th birthday. He's been a regular in Lyon squads since not long after his 16th birthday, which, I mean, for a club as big as Lyon, and which has a youth academy as prolific as it does, that's no small feat, because you have to be a standout throughout the age groups. And if you're constantly playing above, if you're constantly, knocking on that door and through different managers being given opportunities, there's clearly something there. And, to anybody who's seen clips of Cherki, he is just fantastic. The Lyon Algerian link continues. I think I've got my notes here where, Karim Benzema, Nebel Fekir, Houssem Aouar, Amin Gouiri, Ishak Belfodil, Rashid Ghazal, Yassine Benzia, these players are players who've got that Algerian heritage, and Cherki is the next on that line. But from a sort of a footballing sense, moving away from his background, I think he played 27 times in Ligue 1 last season, but I mean, we're talking there were some 1 and 2 minute appearances in there. I think there was only 5 starts, so there was limited opportunities. You're going to struggle to impact the game or impact a season based on that amount of minutes. But when he did play against Ligue 2 opposition in Coupe de France, he was very, very good. He's very fun. Like he's got a great first touch. Lovely little spin that he's got, which can just nick himself away from danger. He sort of has that innate ability to identify space before he's received the ball and knows where he's going to go. And it's that sort of on and off ball intelligence that I think is hugely underrated when it comes to young players, because if you've already got that, you can work on the technical aspects, you can work on the physical aspects to further hone yourself. And Cherki already has he already has a lot of the building blocks there. And the reason that I've gone with him as sort of my breakout pick, he is sort of the poster boy of this episode. I don't think Ali will mind me saying, but is because I've mentioned there that he was predominantly used off the bench in sort of quite fleeting appearances. But in pre-season, he's played 45 minutes against Bourg-en-Bresse, 75 against Wolfsburg, 90 against Villarreal, 20 against Sporting, 62 against Porto, and then played an hour against Stade Brest on the left wing in that first game of the season for Lyon. So, it's one of those where you hope that he'll get he'll get a good return in terms of goals and assists, and you can imagine he will, playing for a good team like Lyon. But there's also the conversation where we can't be too expectant of a player like him, because he won't always be impactful every single game. I mean, I don't want to say I don't know him personally, so I can't say that his temperament or anything is like any of his predecessors. But I do like the stylistic link to a player like Hatem Ben Arfa. He's just got that ability. He's got it from day one. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of Hatem Ben Arfa was that when he did turn it on, which as his career progressed was less and less, but when he did turn it on, especially in those periods with Nice, I think it was, he ran the game. And I do believe that in a few years' time, Cherki has the potential to be able to do that as sort of a mercurial playmaker, just so delicate and so deft, but so cutting and cunning.
The defining image I have in my head of Rayan Cherki is that goal he scored against Monaco, which broke Monegasque hearts and probably was the final nail in the coffin of, I say the coffin wasn't even built before that game. Monaco were still thinking they could win Ligue 1, but after that game, towards the end of the season, I think it was about May time, start of May, when Rayan Cherki scored. Big moments, big game player perhaps in the making. Yeah, I think he's totally somebody who has, as you say, somebody who has it. It's so hard to pinpoint what it is exactly, but when you watch him, and there's a reason as well, when Rayan Cherki wasn't starting for Lyon and wasn't coming on for Lyon, so many Lyon fans on social media would be saying, bring Cherki on. And obviously, Rudy Garcia knew better than your sort of usual Lyon fan, as knowledgeable as some of them are, I'm sure. But I think it speaks volumes of Cherki's ability and Cherki's appeal, even at his young age. He's just somebody who you want to see play, and somebody who, to use a cliche, will get fans up off their seats and on their feet.
Yeah, I think appeal is a good way to say it. He's a player who has enormous appeal. Anybody who goes to watch Lyon, anybody who is blessed enough to visit the Groupama Arena like yourself, is definitely going to be treated, I think. But moving on to your second pick, Ali, and you've gone with Moïse Sahi, and I've probably pronounced that incorrectly, but I'm allowed. I'm going to let myself off with that one, because he's a player who was signed from Afrique Football Elite in Mali in January of this year. So he's only been in Europe's top 5 leagues for, 7-8 months. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's quite strangely, I think for clubs like Strasbourg, who he plays for, who perhaps might not award lengthy contracts to players who you might typically dub a risk, they've given him a contract until 2025. And he made 6 sub appearances for Strasbourg last season. And this year, you've gone with him as a breakout pick. I mean, this was one of the names where I looked at and we just went, nope, not ringing any bells here. So my question to you, Ali, is why is he in line for a breakout season?
Maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, Joe, because regular listeners of the Road to Nowhere podcast will know that I'm as close to a diehard fan as somebody from the west coast of Scotland can be. I had a season ticket there when they won promotion from Ligue 2 into Ligue 1 a few seasons ago now, and just developed an unconditional love for the club. And he caught my eye with a split second of technique against PSG when he scored his first goal in the league for Strasbourg last season. It was a shot on the half volley, not even fully looking at the goal. It was just so instinctive, such an instinctive finish. So maybe it's wishful thinking on my part that he'll go on and have a breakout season. To be honest, we were saying just before we came on air that he'll probably maybe only score, if he scores at all, he'll maybe only score 3 or 4 goals. But I'll dine out on every last one of those 3 or 4 goals this season. I think
as you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you should.
And I think it's probably most accurate to describe him as my wildcard pick, Joe. If I can indulge myself with a wildcard pick, there is a lot for us still to learn about Moïse Sahi, but I texted my friend from Strasbourg, who I used to sit next to and had my season ticket there, and he's very to the point. and he's very trustworthy with his opinions on players. His first impressions tend to be spot on, in all honesty. He just has this remarkable knack for just eyeing up a player and providing a prompt opinion on him. And he just replied saying, "Très bien," you don't need to have advanced higher or even uni level French to know, like, very good, very good. And I said, I thought about asking him to elaborate somewhat, but it's the way he is. He's very to the point. And I thought, yeah, okay, we'll take that. But yeah, like, just to give a bit more background, born in the Ivory Coast, joined Strasbourg's ranks in January 2021, as you said, from Afrique Football Elite in Mali, which coincidentally was the same club/academy from which El Bilal Touré joined Reims last year. So there's a connection there. Maybe the two of them will face up against each other at some point this season, perhaps. But I think the fact that he's been handed that contract until 2025 speaks volumes of just how highly the club rate him. He was scouted by Bruno Paterno, and the club, based on what I've read, are happy with the progress he's making. He's probably the player out of the five that we've picked who's maybe the least furthest along in his progression. But I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm just saying he's probably got the most work to do to reach the level to be playing at Ligue 1 regularly. But I think the signs are really promising. 6 sub-appearances last season, scored that lovely goal on the half volley against PSG, and that was just his second appearance. Fast forward to his most recent appearance, that was against Montpellier in May. He managed 37 minutes there, so it's still very much cameos here and there, but he managed 16 carries. 4 of those carries were progressive carries. He was more generally involved in possession, willing to get on the ball, received more passes. So I think we're seeing his confidence develop. We're seeing him become more at ease with playing in a top-flight French team. And in terms of his outstanding attribute, Joe, it looks like it will be his two-footedness. He's strong with his left foot, he's strong with his right foot, and that gives his game an air of unpredictability and spontaneity. There was a really good clip of some French pundits speaking about the fact that Sahi is so two-footed, and they were saying defenders don't know if he's going to go left or right, and Sahi himself probably doesn't know if he's going to go left or right. And playing as a second striker, I think, that's a perfect attribute to have.
A bit like the Ousmane Dembele, which foot do you take penalties with?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, exactly.
My left. Which foot do you take your free kicks with? My right. It's like,
yeah.
Come on, make your mind up.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be greedy, Moïse, and make your mind up. But I think
some of us aren't lucky enough to have one good foot, so come on.
Exactly, Joe. Exactly. But people also speak of his relâchement in advanced areas. That translates literally to relaxation, but we would probably speak of his composure. His play has une essence, which means an ease, or poise is probably the best word. He just looks really composed. He looks really assured, even at his young age. I'm not saying that he's a fully accomplished player, but you can see that he has the sort of foundational attributes to allow him to go on and become the sort of player who is so cool, calm, and collected, to use a cliche. And again, we are just speaking off of very brief cameos, but the signs are really positive. People are really excited about him. They're excited about his composure, the fact that he's so comfortable on the ball, but he's also lively. He combines that composure with a sort of controlled aggression with the ball. He's a buzz of a player, and you factor in as well the fact that he's good with both feet. There are signs there that he could go on to be a really important player for Strasbourg. Maybe this season's slightly early, maybe not, but certainly over the course of his contract, I think we'll really see him come into his own. Francois Keller, the Strasbourg reserves coach, who obviously spent a lot of time with him, described his best position as a 9.5. And that probably, that's probably a spot-on description. Comfortable as a forward, he's comfortable as an attacking midfielder, he's comfortable, I would think, at dropping between the lines and really probing that space. So let's hope he can get a few starts under Julien Stéphan. When Julien Stéphan was announced as Strasbourg manager, I was absolutely delighted. I was posting it in every single group chat of which I'm a member, and most people were like, yeah, that's cool. A few people, Owen Brown from Pure Fitbaw said, great appointment, you must be happy with that. And I was really delighted. He obviously worked as a coach in Rennes Youth Academy initially before going on to manage the first team, and he placed so much faith in young players. Adrien Truffert, Fetou Mawassa, Eduardo Camavinga, to name just a few, were all afforded ample game time under Julien Stéphan. So I think we'll see him afford, a decent amount of game time to Moïse Sahi. My one concern I would have in terms of game time, we spoke about how Malo Gusto's benefited from the fact that Lyon don't have too many options at right back. Strasbourg have a wealth of attacking options going forward. You think in particular about just some of the players that they have. They've got Habib Diallo, Kevin Gamero's just signed, Ludovic Ajorc, who's one of my favourite players in the world. Not the best player in the world, but I just love his style. You've got Lebo Matiba coming back from injury. You've got Majid Varis. All very strong attacking options. But Ajorc does play best with a second striker supporting him. That's a fact. So could we perhaps see that second striker become Moïse Sahi this season? Maybe.
Potentially. And the little bit of chat there on Julien Stéphan and Rennes, I think takes me into a nice little segue into my next player. But first, I just want to say, relaxation. That I'm going to start using that, just like about a player, who's very composed in possession, a bit like Dimitar Berbatov, taking it down on the touch. Just look at the relaxation.
Do you want another word? Do you want another lovely French word?
Hit me again.
So there's a word éclosion, and it translates literally to hatching, as in like the insect hatching from its egg, or something hatching from its egg. And I've seen it used for Malo Gusto on Twitter, and I saw it used as well for Elye Wahi, who we're going to come on to talk about. So it's clearly, maybe it's a word that's in vogue right now, a bit like on brand. It was really in vogue last year. Maybe the French are loving using this word éclosion.
Is that sort of like breakout? Is that what I'm thinking?
Yeah, so that would be like, it's a really particular way of describing someone who's about to break out. Someone who's about to burst out their shell and take the league by storm. It is a lovely word, I think.
Well, speaking of which, a player who is about to hatch and has already hatched their first 88 minutes in Ligue 1 this season was Lesley Ugochukwu, who's 17 years old, playing for Stade Rennes, right-footed defensive midfielder. Did not stray from the central channel of the pitch pretty much in that first 88 minutes that he played, the Stade Rennes Ligue 1 opener with Lens. And I mean, you look at that midfield, who they have. I mean, they've got Flavien Tate and Eduardo Camavinga, and then behind they have anchoring it Lesley Ugochukwu, and you think, can Rennes stop this? Because they're continuing to produce extremely languid, good ball players, players who look as though they might have the potential to be very good carriers as well. But on my 88-minute viewing, I was not overly impressed, but I thought, considering that he is, first of all, 17, he's not had a great deal of football at all. I think that one appearance this season has already surpassed his minutes for last year in Ligue 1. I think he only played around an hour in a couple of games, over a couple of games, sorry. But yeah, there was something about him. And Ali, this was sort of your recommendation to me to go and check him out, and I did, and I was not overly impressed, but I was pleasantly surprised.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few duels where I thought he maybe looked a bit lightweight, and he's probably around 6'2", 6'3". Well, he's probably actually 6'2", but looks a little bit taller because of his build, which is very slender. But to be trusting him to be anchoring that midfield, I think is quite an endorsement. And in terms of his passing, his awareness of where his teammates were going to be, that's somebody who's clearly been training with the first team for a number of months. This isn't somebody who's been put in there out of necessity and kind of just thrown to the wolves. But yeah, he was pretty secure, I thought. Very organised. Knew what was expected of him. There was no, I don't want to say no frills, because it's very difficult to say that about a player based on one appearance. And typically I wouldn't do that, but I suppose this is the whole point of a breakout episode, really, isn't it? It's that, these players have maybe made one or two appearances or have played a little bit in pre-season, and it's kind of a prediction. But this Ren team this season are going to be very, very exciting, and that's not just because Scouted Football cover star Kamaldeen Sulemana is playing on the wing, and obviously scored his first goal in that game. Great finish, cutting in off the left. But I thought that Ugochukwu had a good appreciation of the space that he was required to cover. Especially in the first half. The second half was a little bit more fraught as Long started to push a bit more. But I think having that organisation, having that no frills, because I haven't come up with a better term in the last 30 seconds to a minute when I said it and didn't like it the first time, having that will be quite useful because, if you've got someone like Camavinga who this season is going to be, expected to support attacks, you're going to have wide players who are going to really, really stretch defences. And that is naturally going to stretch a team that's going to leave spaces in behind. So to protect the back four, and of which one of those is Loic Bade, and we know he likes to go on a dribble. So Ugochukwu is going to need to have a good appreciation of space, know where he needs to be, snuff out danger quite quickly, and be good at covering sort of those lateral spaces. Moving sideways, almost crab-like. So I'm hoping that that's what we'll see from him. Obviously, there's no guarantee. He might be out of the team next week. Who knows? But based on that first viewing, he did not look overawed. It was not a case of me thinking, oh yeah, you can really tell that Rennes have got a 17-year-old anchor in that midfield. So yeah, hopes are high, but I think I'm keeping my powder dry a little bit on the old Erling Haaland predictions or the those types of things, or the next Camavinga. No, they're different players. So don't get your hopes up, everyone. But yeah, I was quite impressed with Ugochukwu. But yeah, you recommended him. Is that because you saw that he started and you recognised that he was first of all 17?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some work to do, Joe, because like you, like you, I don't know an awful lot about him, but from what I did see, he looked, no thrills. It's not no thrills is in itself a no thrills word, isn't it? But it probably works well here. One of the reasons as well, I'm quite keen to see how he fares this season is that I think for all Rennes' eye-catching recruitment this summer, and it has been, particularly from a Scouted Football perspective, very eye-catching. I don't know if the failure or the potential failure to replace Steven Nzonzi might come back to haunt them. He's obviously returned to Roma after his loan, and I just feel that his experience, his ability to be that no-thrills player, to use that word again, I do wonder if post Nzonzi, Rennes will, not that they didn't appreciate him when he was there, I think they did appreciate him, but I do just wonder if Ugochukwu is capable, and it's so much pressure to put on his young shoulders, is capable of stepping into the shoes, or at least of fulfilling some of the roles and discharging some of the duties that Nzonzi, a World Cup winner, let's not forget, was able to do so well for Rennes last season. It's a lot to ask of him, but obviously Bruno Genesio has faith in him, and I think Rennes will be a really interesting watch this season. They looked really good towards the tail end of last season under Genesio. They've got these Scouted Football stars in their ranks as well. I think they will be not the best team in the league this season, but for people who like watching a squad with plenty of young players, I think they'll be a must watch most weekends.
Yeah, from a neutral perspective, I think it's one of those where, if you don't have a foot in either camp, if you watch French football but you don't really support a team, then I think Rennes are absolutely top billing every week. But on the topic of Ugochukwu and Steven Nzonzi, if it doesn't work out, if Genesio thinks that he could do with maybe some football elsewhere, maybe send him on loan to Blackburn and then Stoke for a season or 6 months each, and see if he then turns into the next Steven Nzonzi.
Exactly.
Maybe get Ricardo Fuller, Rory Delap, Mark Pugh to give him some pointers. I don't even know if they played with Nzonzi at Stoke. They might be a few years before his time, but yeah, I don't know. Who knows? That could be a little method they could use. But nah, he impressed me. Going on to your final pick then, and you mentioned his name earlier, but to any of us who weren't as eagle-eared, they might have just thinking you were saying Moïse Sahi again. You weren't. You were saying Elye Wahi, which obviously not to be confused, which I was when I was going through our WhatsApp chat earlier on. I was thinking, is he just named the same player? Is he named the same player twice? Is he trying to catch me out because I haven't replied in a while? Yeah. 18-year-old, plays for Montpellier, right-footed centre forward, but started the Montpellier's opening game of the season on the left wing. He's another who's recently extended his contract until 2025, and I think that is, again, reflective of the faith, but also protecting an asset. But yeah, he, in terms of breakout players, a lot of the ones that we've mentioned previously, bar Rayan Cherki, have essentially played a handful, and I mean a handful of games and a handful of minutes. Whereas Wahi has played over 20 games for Montpellier. He's scored 3 goals in Ligue 1 last season, played over 500 minutes. But again, the crucial thing, only 4 league starts. So he slots nicely into our little breakout category. I'm gonna give you the floor for this one because I actually didn't watch any of Wahi. I just did my background and kind of coming to the end of my notes here, and I'm kind of thinking, come on, Ali, take the reins here.
Yeah, for sure. And I will forgive you for leaving me on red when I suggested Elye Wahi, because I was throwing names at you left, right, and centre before we arrived at our golden 5 for the episode. But yeah, Elye Wahi, you mentioned his 3 goals last season, which is fairly impressive for such a young player who basically only played half a season, and even at that, the minutes were fairly limited when all's considered. But scored against Monaco, scored the winner against Lyon, and saved his best effort for the game against Lens with the most spectacular acrobatic effort. If you haven't watched that goal, do go and watch it. It's all over YouTube. Elye Wahi against Lens for Montpellier. Yeah, he can play on the left wing, as he predominantly did against Marseille on the weekend in that pulsating game of football. Ended on a slightly sour note, but that sour note aside, it was a brilliant advert for French football. But we also saw him pop up occasionally on the right hand side as well. So he is comfortable on the left side or on he's comfortable on the left side or on the right side. And I think, we spoke beforehand about would there be room for him in this team with Andy Delors and Gaëtan Laborde there, and I think there absolutely is. It looks like Olivier Dalolio will probably go with a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, or at least a nominal 4-3-3 and a nominal 4-2-3-1. So absolutely there'll be a place for him either very wide or slightly tucked inside in a fairly wide position. I think he'll probably be in direct competition with Stephy Mavididi, an excellent young player who impressed me quite a lot last season, still only 22, 23. He actually replaced Elye Wahi on Sunday night after 63 minutes against Marseille, but last season Mavididi netted 9 times last season in all competitions. So I think we could see quite healthy competition between the two players, and I think they could probably push each other on. Their gameplay is not extremely similar, but there are a few similarities to their game, and I think the two of them as young players, fairly young players anyway in Mavididi's instance, but I think the two of them can provide really healthy competition and can really push each other on. Just focusing again on Olivier Dalolio's style and how that really suits Elye Wahi. Dalolio loves to use his wide players. He loves to get the ball out wide. There's this emphasis with his tactics on really looking to exploit the wide positions. And we saw against Marseille, certainly in the first half and for spells at the start of the second half, Montpellier had so much joy and so much joy down the wings. I mean, and that's partly down to the really quite complex formation that Jorge Sampaoli was playing with Marseille. I'm still not quite sure what that formation was, but there were a lot of spaces out wide, and we saw Dalolio's Brest side last season really utilise the flanks to quite impressive effect. So that, I think, bodes well for Wahi's in-game involvement. Joe, I don't know how many games he'll start, but I think we'll see him and Mavididi switching quite regularly. So yeah, the signs are good off the back of that impressive first season, or fairly impressive first season last season. Just to rewind a few years, you might remember, or you might not remember, maybe some listeners will remember, but there was quite a lot of talk a few years ago about Wahi when he netted 89 goals in a single season for Caen's under-15 side. We seem to get these amazing numbers pop up every so often. A young player scoring a ridiculous amount of goals for an under-14s team and an under-15s team. Wahi was one of those boys. At the time, reportedly, Liverpool, Spurs, Southampton, Man City, Man United, Juve were all interested. That didn't materialise into a move, but he now finds himself on the South Coast. Great place to play your football, Montpellier as well. And he's in a team that's so fun. Olivier Dallorio is one of the most fun coaches, I think, in France, maybe even in the top 5 leagues in Europe. And he'll have them playing some really swashbuckling stuff this season. I think that probably suits Wahi. Just another side note, and I do like my side notes. I do like to digress, Joe, as you probably gathered from this episode. But he previously played a few years ago. This was probably before he was even at Caen. This was in his very early formative years. He played for GS Suresnes in the suburbs of Paris. Coincidentally, N'Golo Conte also spent some time there in his very early formative years. So they're obviously very different players, but maybe the coaches there are onto something with two really exciting players. Obviously, Conte's a lot more established and a far more accomplished player than Wahi. I'm not comparing the two for the slightest. All I'm saying is that it maybe is a good sign for Wahi in terms of where he started out and those really those kind of foundational years serving him well. Just to focus again on his playing style, and I'll use his game against Marseille, his performance against Marseille, to really inform what I'm saying here, because last season, while he had minutes, it was fairly limited. I think the game against Marseille, coupled with his pre-season performances, really give us quite an extensive insight into what we can expect from him. So he's quite a direct dribbler, capable of taking up intelligent goal-scoring positions, and we actually saw that. I know I said I would focus on pre-season and performances so far this season against Marseille, but we saw him take up a really sort of potent position, shall we say, against Lyon, being in the right place in the right time. It was almost like a deadly number 9 positioning there. So he has that ability to take up these intelligent positions. He loves to score goals, and
evidently after that 89 goal season.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was not aware of that whatsoever.
Yeah,
and I also on that N'Golo Conte point, who knew who N'Golo Conte was when he was 18? So it's one of these things. These players work their way up, but
exactly. Yeah, I think the signs are there that he could go on. Not that we want to put too much pressure on the player, but I think he is backing up not so much the hype, but he's backing up the praise that he's quite rightly receiving. And I speak about that direct style, Joe. We really saw that against Marseille on 2 occasions in particular. There was this really positive burst into the box and a beautiful half turn. Didn't quite manage to score, but just that awareness and that execution.
The fact he's trying it.
Yeah, exactly. It's that confidence as an 18-year-old against Marseille in front of fans as well. Let's not forget. And obviously, don't applaud a fish for swimming. Doing something in front of fans. But given that last season fans weren't in the grounds, it is. I think it is noteworthy that he's having that confidence to go on and execute that half turn. It wasn't audacious, but it was beautiful, Joe. And then we saw as well, he took the ball to William Saliba. This was slightly later on in the second half. He turned William Saliba inside out, and we know how good.
I hope Mikel Arteta wasn't watching. That's not going to help his chances, is it?
Probably Mikel Arteta will just be watching a loop of that video, and he'll somehow...
One of his minions will have forwarded it to him. Oh, no.
Yeah, I thought Saliba was actually very good, but that's another point. He was very good on Sunday night as an overlapping centre half as well in the second half. Sampaoli pushed him and Luan Perez forward, but I'm digressing, Joe. Sorry. So he turned William Saliba inside out and then inside out again, and it was almost like he was teasing the defender. He drags his shot wide when he maybe should have hit the target, but I was just like, wow, this boy's, maybe he's not going to go all the way to the top. I don't know right now, but there's something there. It's not so much that he has it in the same way as Rayan Cherki, but there's something there. There's a directness to his play. There's a confidence, maybe even an air of, I don't know if you use this word down south, but in Scotland we talk of somebody who's gallus, someone who's really maybe even overconfident. I get those vibes slightly from him, and he did a really entertaining interview with Score in French, and he just sounded a little bit gallus. He spoke about scoring goals, and he spoke about his this just desire to get on the score sheet, and he
Mm.
backed that up in pre-season. 4 goals in 5 pre-season matches, and he set himself for an 18-year-old. He set himself the quite ambitious target of 10 goals this season in the league, which
setting
is
yourself up to fail.
yeah,
No, surely.
exactly. But I think that reflects his confidence, his composure. Maybe he's a little bit cheeky. We've not seen too much of the cheeky side so far, but I think he's a sort of player who, once he becomes even more at ease with being a first team player, once he starts scoring a few more goals, I think we could maybe see a cheeky side from him.
I mean, 3 goals in 543 minutes last season. That's not a bad return,
Yeah.
realistically, when you put all that together. And you have to think, I mean, this year, obviously, Brest and Montpellier did the old switcheroo with the managers, didn't they? With Michel Dezacarian going to Brest and Olivier Dall'Olio going to Montpellier. So, Dall'Olio is a vibrant coach, I think it's fair to say. I remember reading an interview that Romain Perrault did, obviously now at Southampton. And he was saying that, Dall'Olio's philosophy is essentially, I don't care how many we concede. If we continue to attack, we will score more than you. And while it doesn't transpire all the time, it's very much the Kevin Keegan approach to winning Premier League titles. And we all know how that went. But yeah, I tell you what, it could certainly be an interesting season for Elye Wahi, as well as Moïse Sahi and Malo Gusto and Lesley Ugochukwu, and of course Rayan Cherki, we can't forget. But yeah, that just wraps up today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, and of course thank you to Ali for his expertise on Ligue, because quite clearly, as we've discussed over this podcast, I would have been absolutely nowhere without it. So yeah, very, very pleased to have had you on, and we've been talking about breakout stars. I tell you what, how about breakout scouted football podcast guests?
Well, Joe, I would absolutely love to come back on if you'll have me again. It's been an honour. We're recording, it really is quite late. Normally I'm in my bed reading my geopolitical books. By this point, I try and have no screen time an hour before bed. I try and read about the Iraq War and dark money in British politics. But I tell you what, this has been a fantastic way to round off a really football-filled evening. Thank you very much for having me on.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. As gallus as you are being there about being invited back on, I'm sure there will be some more Ligue that we have to discuss. There absolutely will be. Even if it is just Elye Wahi leading the show when PSG come to visit. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. If you haven't already, get on over to YouTube, get on over to Twitter, Instagram, give Scouted Football a like, follow, subscribe, do all that sort of thing, or sfhandbook.com if you'd like to read some more in-depth profiles, quite similarly to what we've done on the podcast here today. But I've been Joe Donoghue. This has been the Scouted Football Podcast. Bye for now. Please leave a like and a comment and subscribe to learn more about the best young football players in the world.